Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching Focal Length, where we give you a briefing on topics from across the world. Is the era of US hegemony coming to an end? Will the global institutions US was so instrumental in creating become less relevant and forceful with time? Will Beijing be successful in crafting new institutions derived from a Chinese footprint? Let's find out. Joining us is Daniel Wagner, a banker, financial expert and author. Daniel is founder and CEO of Country Risk Solutions. He has 3 decades of experience managing cross-border risk, is an authority on political risk insurance and analysis. He also has 12 years of underwriting experience with the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank Group. He has authored the China Epiphany, comprehending China's relationship with America and the world. Thank you, Daniel Wagner, for joining us. My first question to you is, tell us about your book, The China Epiphany.
China Epiphany is really the culmination of a 3-year effort on my part to write this book while I was living and working in Beijing, and then to revise it after I had finished living and working in Beijing. And the idea is that we're living in a world where there are very clearly 2 global powers, neither of which are going anywhere. Those people in America and elsewhere who think that the Chinese Communist Party is somehow going to wither and go away, and that the Chinese people are going to rise up and overthrow it, I think they're sadly mistaken. I don't see that happening. The CCP is omnipotent, and that was certainly demonstrated to me while I lived and worked there. Really, the book is sort of saying its key messages are, we need to find a way to work together. No one's going anywhere. And both sides really need to get in the habit of understanding where the other is coming from and agreeing that there are some boundaries that need to be established and worked within. And if they agree to do that, then we're going to have a path forward. And if they don't, then I'm afraid we're just going to get further and further into the morass.
You spent a considerable amount of time in China at the height of COVID. How was your experience?
Well, as anyone who lived through that would tell you, it was extremely difficult. We lived under very onerous tradition. Excuse me, let me start over. We lived under very difficult conditions, and there were periods where people were basically incarcerated, both in Beijing and elsewhere in the country. That is sort of ranging from being literally having cities shut down to being locked up in your apartment for weeks at a time. And there's really only 1 or 2 countries in the world that could have successfully attempted to do this. China is one, and perhaps North Korea is the other, and they tried to do the same thing. But for those of us who were living and working there, it proved to be extremely difficult. And I think one of the lessons that I learned from it is that I was sort of in awe of how omnipotent the CCP was and how efficiently they acted in executing their plan.
You have worked for Asia Infra Investment Bank, which has seen undue Chinese influence in the multilateral organisation. Could you share your experiences?
Well, I would say, first of all, that the idea that there would be one country that might be dominant in a multilateral development bank, or MDB, that's not so unusual. If you look at the World Bank, the US is quite dominant. If you look at the Asian Development Bank, Japan is quite dominant. So the idea that China is quite dominant in the AIB is not such a new theme. In fact, China's shareholding in the AIB is about 30%, and that's about the same amount that the US has in the Inter-American Development Bank. So the issue really is it's created by China right around the time of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's got a Chinese president. It's got a lot of Chinese leadership within the bank. But it also is an institution which is deliberately similar to other MDBs in terms of its governance and structure. So I would say one of the things that I should certainly point out is that the AIB has accomplished a lot in a very short period of time and with limited staff and resources. And if you compare their productivity to that of the other MDBs, I think it holds a very good record.
Is it true the bank is dominated by CCP members? How has it impacted the functioning of the bank?
Well, it's true to say that there are quite a few CCP members in the bank, And although I don't have absolute proof, my presumption is that the majority, if not all of the senior leadership within the bank is CCP members. And there is even a representative of the CCP in the president's office. Whether I could say that every Chinese person in the bank is a CCP member, I have no way of knowing, although it wouldn't surprise me at all if the majority of them were. And if you understand how things work in China, it's not so surprising that that would be the case. The AIB is the country's most elite multilateral institution. And I think it's only natural that people from the CCP would want to work there. I don't know in terms of hiring process whether only CCP members can work there if they happen to be Chinese.
Have the US and other countries done enough to counter China economically? And is it practical for economies to decouple from China?
Well, I'm not sure that there are that many economies that want to decouple from China in the first place, including the US. As you will be aware, your listeners will be aware, the economies of both countries in this case, and all the countries of the world basically, are in some way tied to China and vice versa. They have a symbiotic relationship. So I think I speak for America when I say that they have no interest in decoupling from China. I think what they would like to do is find a better formula, if you will, for balancing the needs of individual countries with the needs and desires of China. But China's been very, very effective over the last several decades, as you will be aware, of linking their economy with those of the US and much of the rest of the world. So the idea of decoupling, even if countries wanted to do so, would be difficult to do so, and it would take many years or perhaps decades to do that.
Thank you, Daniel Wagner, for joining us on Focal Length. With that, it's a wrap on today's episode. For more international news updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.